You are very special.
Hello, everyone. It is Taylor, and I am here with an amazing guest. I'm not sure if you've heard about EMFs and the 49ers and who believes it and who doesn't, but I have the guy who uncovered this here with us today, and his name is Peter Cowan. He's a certified quantum biology practitioner. He works in EMF consulting, he's an EMF coach as well. He created the Sunlight is Life app, which I personally love and I use it. And I'm really excited to get into his journey because it's unconventional and it's different than a lot of people in the space that talk about biology, biophysics, life, health, wellness, and all of that. And I'm really excited to dive into his unconventional journey and what got him here and all of the crevices. So, Peter, thank you so much for joining us. I really appreciate you.
Thanks for having me, Taylor. Looking forward to it.
Yay. So you've said a bunch, or maybe not a bunch, but you have said that someday you'd love to tell your life story. So I am super curious on what you maybe haven't told others that arrived and allowed you to get to this point in your life right now. I would say over the past few months, it's definitely been different than your traditional life, if you will, for the past, as long as you've been on this earth. So, what are some of the missing chapters that maybe you haven't really talked about that you feel like are vital and pivotal to be the person you are and have the mindset that you do today?
Damn. You start out with a real easy question there.
Yes, for anyone that knows, we don't do surface level bullshit. We go right for the jugular here. We're all. I think that's where we could get the best flavor and the best nuggets. So I appreciate that.
I always have. I mean, it's always hard to know where to start, And also, I don't remember what I have said and haven't said on other podcasts.
So let's go. I would love to go to maybe right after not finishing high school and like that journey. You know what I mean? You kind of growing up and recognizing that maybe you wanted to aspire to something, but your journey didn't take you there initially, and how that all.
Thank you for seeding that, because actually I was thinking about that the other day. I was like a really smart kid, always at the top of the class, winning. Like, remember in 7th grade, I won I got 3rd place in a county math competition, but also got a C in algebra that year. Like, and I didn't
Makes
study.
sense.
I don't know. Yeah, I didn't study for it. One of the teachers, my 6th grade teacher was like, you should do this. I was in 7th grade and I was like, okay, didn't study, got 3rd place in the county. And so I wasn't like a good student, but I always kind of did well. And then after puberty, things just kind of started changing. I wasn't doing as well in school as I had. I think there's something about elementary school is like, if you're gifted, I'm not trying to say I'm special, but you know what I mean? Like, you can kind of just follow your curiosity and there's more freedom and it's less regimented. And then middle school and high school, all of a sudden you have these like classes with certain, specific requirements and stuff. And it just didn't work for me. And I was bored out of my mind. And my dad had gotten me, we were in Silicon Valley in a small town called Scotts Valley, just off the coast near Santa Cruz. Mm. And he had subscribed to this magazine called Byte magazine, which had like taught you how to program in the back. I would just copy the instructions and I would learn how to program just from basically copying BASIC. It's a very early programming language. And so I was into coding, and I had some friends who had dropped out of high school and they're on some local bulletin boards, which is, you may not know what that is.
Throwing it back a little bit.
So everybody who's watching this who's younger than like, let's see, 35, maybe 40, should go watch a movie called War Games from 1983 starring Matthew Broderick. It's an amazing movie. It's such a 1980s Cold War, but also like 1980s like roller skates and video game arcades and pizza parlor kind of movie. Watch it. I'm gonna go rewatch it. And so a bulletin board is, you take your old like rotary phone and you'd put it on like this old school. You'd put it on this modem and it would dial up and you'd hear this kind of static noise. You'd connect your very basic computer to like a command line bulletin board that could have one user at a time. So you'd have to wait till other people weren't on there. And then, but it was very like early kind of like Reddit kind of thing where you'd post a thread or whatever. So we were on these bulletin boards and we figured out how to get access to the university system. Well, my friends had paid for what they called a sundry account, but I think the statute of limitations on wire fraud is gone. I was working at a movie theater and we got a lot of applications from people who went to the university, and I figured out how to use their job applications to get free accounts at the university system.
Let's go.
And so we started spending all of our time on those computers, and you could go online, you could use the modem, and that was a multi-user system. So we had access to the internet at that time, and it blew my mind. It was like IRC was Internet Relay Chat was a very early chat, and it was completely decentralized. Like unlike the internet that we have today with like these massive companies that just kind of monopolize one sector, there was no monopoly. So it was just, and so you'd find these servers in like Europe and Russia, and you'd talk to people from all over the world and learn how to code like security stuff and just like hacking all the time. So basically I was very addicted to tech from an early age. And we wound up, so what happened, we figured out that the university, you could get on campus after 2 a.m. because the security left, because nobody's trying to get on after 2 a.m. And
except for the nerds.
Yeah. And yeah, except for the nerds. So if you ever go to Santa Cruz, the campus is called the City on the Hill. It's just like, it's completely separated from town, and it's on this big meadow and then redwoods in the back. It's beautiful. Ocean views. At that time, it was still kind of a hippie college where they didn't have grades, and like, so we made friends with the computer nerds that were going to that school. We sneak on campus after 2 a.m. and spend all night on. There's terminals in every dorm had these little terminals that were just like a dumb like keyboard and monitor that connected to the internet. And so there'd be 4 of them in the room, so we'd all be on them just like, doing our stuff. But then we found the Sun Spark Lab. So Sun Microsystems was a really, really pivotal Silicon Valley company from like an earlier era. I think their IP eventually got bought by Google actually, but they were kind of the Google of like the 80s and 90s. And they had these really powerful computers that could run something called X Windows, which was a color display. So we wanted to get on those. We got on those anyway, figured out how to get root access, and like it was just much more interesting than school. So I just, at one point, my junior year was over, and I just told my parents I wasn't going back to high school. And there was this guy named Wes Beach who had started his own high school, and you paid him $80 and met with him for an hour and told him what you were going to do with your life. And if he approved, then you were enrolled in his high school, and you could just go do whatever you wanted. So that's what I did.
Wow. So you got your high school diploma from West Beach.
Well, no, I didn't get the diploma from it. I took a test, like kind of like the GED kind of thing, but for California, because you have to be 18 to take GED, and I was 17. But I was going to Beach High, basically. So.
And where, like, when you were going through that, so obviously you're not afraid to do things that are a little different. When society is going one way, Peter is not always following that wave, if you will. So I would say that that's like the early seedling, maybe for you feeling comfortable, if you will, to kind of do things against the grain. Would that be right?
I think that goes way earlier, honestly. I've never really thought about it as a grain or non-grain. I just kind of do what I do, and I don't. My dad was telling a story. We were visiting some family, and somebody in the family, a younger kid, was having a hard time. And my dad was talking about the story, and I was just like, gosh, I don't remember having that kind of issue when I was a teenager. And my dad laughs. He's like, you didn't. You were blessed with the I don't give a damn gene. You never gave a damn about anything. And so I think I've just kind of always had so I don't care what people think about what I'm doing. It's kind of a blessing and a curse, because criticism doesn't affect me, but praise also doesn't affect me.
Everything just washes right off your back, if you will. So like you said, it's not a blessing and a curse.
Yeah, it just doesn't even register.
I am thinking about your journey now. When you look back at it and now how you're serving people and like your clients and just serving people with knowledge in general in the universe, is there a specific time when you remember stumbling into like health and biology and wellness, and that like moment you couldn't get rid of it even when you went on to your other paths, and we'll get into that, how you didn't just dump into this world, you were a Wi-Fi engineer, I'm sure you've done a bunch of other things. So was there a moment like in your earlier life that there was something that intrigued you about this space that like has always stuck with you throughout your life until this point?
I think there's a couple pivotal moments. And I really don't think of myself as like a wellness person at all. Like
Mm-hmm.
I've kind of been pulled into it by necessity. I got addicted to computers and inverted my sleep schedule. And so as we all know now, circadian rhythm is very important. And so I was doing coffee in the day and, not eating great. It's the hacker's lifestyle is you're just feeding off the computer.
True.
And so eventually though, I got like wise to the fact that it wasn't serving me, and I quit for like maybe 7 years.
Wow.
And I
Quit
got
as in no hacking, no like computer usage to that extent, or no computer usage at all?
pretty much at all. I didn't own a computer.
Wow.
And this was at a time when you didn't need one. I didn't have a cell phone because why would I have a cell phone? It was 90s. And so I got smart enough to get away from it, but then I got into drinking a lot. And so that was kind of what I substituted. I was doing music and I was touring the country with my band, and it's very boring, like most of the time, even though you're traveling with your best friends and playing music for a small part of the day, mostly just driving and sitting around behind backstage. And anyway, all of that is to say that I had a pretty big health collapse when I was 23, and it manifested in a lot of ways. But the big issue was actually, interestingly, some soft tissue injuries, my back and my wrists. And I got my wrists were so bad. Like usually, you drink water, you can just kind of hold the water glass like this. I had to kind of like rest it between my palms like that. See my fingers, I couldn't really grip it, and I couldn't open a door, and I went to so many different doctors, and nobody could really help me. Eventually, I found a physical therapist who got me back on track, but that was kind of an eye-opening event for me. Thinking I've got good health insurance, and I'm going to specialists, and there's nothing wrong. And so I think that was kind of the first in a series of health collapses. I don't have a better term, but basically cycles where I feel good for a while and then I forget that I am not invincible, and then I destroy myself in some different way, and then learn something new each time. Because I figured out how to not to do the last thing that hurt me, and then I hurt something else. And I think it was around when I was like 33 or 34 that I had what they called adrenal insufficiency, or just like adrenal fatigue, which is one of those. At this point, I'm going to like a naturopath, so I'm getting at least something deeper than your typical doctor.
Mm-hmm.
And so I started learning about the endocrine system, but they're giving me like a thyroid medication, and it was making me hyperthyroid, and I was eating like a hobbit, like 10 meals a day, hungry all the time, not sleeping. And so I was just like, this, why am I taking another thing that's hurting me? And so I think that was when I first realized, oh, the body, it's a system, and I'm into systems because I'm, a hacker, and computers are all about systems. And so that's when I started learning about the system, and learning and starting to understand that the medical paradigm that we exist in doesn't really look at things from a systemic point of view.
Totally.
Yeah.
I think we're isolationists, siloed, you know what I mean? How much could we divide something before we realize that they're so internally and integrally connected that we almost like dismiss it? Because I feel like for a lot of the topics, especially in wellness, it's almost unbelievable at how connected everything is. So it's kind of easy to dismiss something because you're just like, it's just no way that,
Mm.
like, I'm sorry, but even before I came into this space, like someone telling me that like a phone signal can hurt you, I'm like, what? Come on. Like,
Yeah.
it can't be. Like the government or whatever, like they have safety protocols and we're all like,
Right.
all the things that
Yeah.
you're conditioned to think when you're brought up in the traditional system, or like in, talking in these siloed frameworks, that are not to benefit the whole. I mean, any person that has a brain that can detach themselves from the ego has to see that this is a system, approach here that we should be taking to wellness and biology and the environment as a whole. One question before you continue on your journey, and like these little instances that are not little, these instances that kind of shaped your trajectory. When you had your first account at like 23 and realizing, oh shit, something's off here, did you like intuitively know that? I know you knew something was off because that's why you kept going to the doctors, but did you feel like there was a clear sign intuitively and you were just trying to find that doctor that can like verbalize it for you? Or did you kind of dismiss it as well? Were you kind of going with it at some point where you're like, nah, I'm kind of believing what they're saying?
That's a really good question. I think there's a part of me that just wanted an easy answer. And so that part of me was just going to the doctors and looking for that answer and not getting it.
Hmm.
But there's the other side of me that like, so, we talk a lot about trauma right now. It's very popular to talk about it. I have very mixed feelings about the word and the way it's used. But at root, it's very uncontroversial that what they call adverse childhood events can rewire your nervous system. And I think it's also the case that we can err on the side of over interpreting childhood events and giving them power that they don't have. So, all that's to say is that two things happen. I was born 8 weeks early, which will do a number on your nervous system just because it's not fully developed. And there's tons of data on that one. And then I had some adverse events as a kid that I adapted to poorly. And one thing that I did was when I was scared to go to sleep. I became scared to go to sleep, and so I would go to my parents would put me to bed, and then everybody would go to sleep, and I would turn my light on and I would stare at it, because it was counteractive. It was counterintuitively like soothing to me because it is stimulating, but at a certain point, you stimulate too much and you run out of juice, like to
Yeah.
put it at like a higher level. And so I think that kind of created the cycle in my life of seeking stimulation to counterintuitively soothe myself. And so that's a long way of getting back to your question. I've always had this story I don't have it anymore. But at that time, and certainly for a decade or more, I was like, what's wrong with me? Like, there's something wrong with me. I got to figure it out. And of course, there's nothing wrong with me. There's nothing wrong with anybody. Like it's a wrong way of thinking about things. But if you're thinking about things like that's going to lead you to live your life in a way that's not good for you. And so, yeah, go ahead.
I want you to expand a little bit on that like framework of how to approach the thinking about something, because I feel like the whole we can tell ourselves a story is a huge hindrance to so many people. It's the story that they tell themselves about, the experience that they went through. It's so different than what the actual experience was, maybe 10 years later. And then you brought up the whole trauma. And as a child, like, of course, there are events that happen that shape your, the outcomes for later in life. But what is the correlation and what is the depth in which that we give, our childhood experiences the will or the, allowance to take over, that sense of self. So how do you, knowing, have gone through those experiences, how do you think the best way to like, shift your mindset or change your thinking about childhood trauma and experiences that you faced early on in life?
Yeah, I mean, I think at root, I think about what is that story that you're telling yourself? How's it serving you? And what are you getting out of it? And often it's because we've grown to identify with the trauma or whatever you want to call it and who we became because of that. And we're afraid to let go of the story.
Hmm.
And I do remember when I first like got a book about what I was dealing with. I'm not trying to be coy here. I don't think I don't need to go over anything that happened. Like it's not relevant anymore. And it doesn't matter. But when I first started reading about it, it was like all these things that I liked about myself were listed as symptoms. And I'm like,
Mm.
well, how do you reconcile that? You know, and you don't have to. You know, we are who we are, and we go through the things that we go through because I don't know. Everybody has a different explanation. Mine is more. I'm pretty spiritual, and I think our souls are put on this planet for a reason, and we have. Some people call it a soul contract. But I don't do a lot of reading. I'm very intuitive, and so I think all these lessons that I've had to learn are very valuable. And even
I
holding on. Sorry, go ahead.
I totally hear that when you go through certain experiences in your life, and then you keep going through tough experiences, but different lessons are appearing, and you're learning new things, and you're taking, you're applying them, and you're putting them in your toolkit, and you're applying them for the next highs and lows of your life. It's almost undeniable for me that there is this element of, like you said, spirituality. And I think that's a crux of, not what's missing, but it's under talked about, especially in the whole health and wellness thing. I think it's almost ignorant if we don't consider that there is this layer of spiritualism. Some might consider it religious. Some call, have many different names for what they think is their higher being, God, praying to different things. But we all or most can agree that there's just something occurring that is inexplainable and undeniable and needs to be talked about because it is a part of an integral part of this system as we're talking. I want to go deeper into how you're intuitively thinking about the body and you're going through these experiences, and then how you're also a pattern recognizer and you're very big into patterns. So, like a computer, and then looking at the body also as a computer, but kind of differently. So, like for you, how were the two subjects, spiritualism and like health and wellness, always linked, or did you think they were separate? Did you come to one knowing through, the immersion of in wellness, or the immersion in spirituality, which brought you to wellness? Like, was there chicken before the egg, if you will, for you in your story? And how did that kind of take shape and evolve?
I would say that I've always been pretty open, but not from many decades. I just wasn't in tune, I guess I would say, and was a bit spiritually defensive. And so I think a lot of people are in that position because you said that we all can kind of recognize that there's something more powerful out there, and I think that's true. But I think the way it manifests in a lot of people is through resistance, is like almost like fear or aversion of the idea that there is this more powerful thing and that we're not truly in control ourselves, because we like to hold on to that illusion of control, especially people who are like more high functioning and competent. And so that was kind of my MO, is like, if I put my mind to something, I always accomplish it. I could do it. It was easy. And people, my whole life, people have come to me just for answers. And I just do it because, like, why can't I? Now I've learned more recently to not do that so much just for their own benefit, but people need to learn to be more resourceful themselves. But I think a lot of people find themselves, and it's certainly in the wellness space, where you have a lot of people who've been wronged by the medical system kind of figuring out their own stuff. You get that kind of mindset, and it's a different mindset than the spiritual mindset, which is the way I think about it is like, I learned after going viral that the wellness space, it might be optimized, but it's not well
Mm.
across the board. It's not spiritually well at all. And so I did not come to that through wellness and optimization. I came through it just by getting dragged kicking and screaming into realizing, just learning that lesson one too many times, that it's not about controlling things. You can't. You really can't. And you can try, and you can live your whole life, and you can bash your head into the wall and make things work, and I was always good at making things work. But I had a girlfriend for during the pandemic, and for whatever reasons we couldn't make it work. But I was still locked in this like I can fix things, and because she was amazing and the things were great, and there was just like this one or two things were just like logically not happening, and it wasn't anything I could do about it. And so I think that lesson finally brought me to like, and then right at the end of that relationship, I finally figured out like the last remaining health issues that I was struggling with, and I came out on this physical high of just like
Oh.
I feel so great, and I'm just like I feel like a teenager again, like before I first got sick. And but there was like a little crack in the foundation. My sleep got worse after my health got better. And so,
The whole like when you recognize your health, what do you think that was? Do you think that was trauma being released, or and like this relationship was you recognizing that trauma in a different light maybe? Like what can you pinpoint maybe what
well,
that final.
it's a very wise question you'd ask. Almost like you read my mind. So when I went on the first date with her name's Allie, we were both just like kind of whatever, just like, and
I'm here.
honestly, yeah, it's just like, you know, and we played some video games and we neither of us really drink, and we just had like a cider. And then she was like, I haven't had dinner yet, is there a good place to eat around here? And so I was, yeah, I'll take you over here. And so I was ready to go home, but she was hungry, so we went. And she sits down and she's like, so what's the last book you read? And at this point I was like, I have zero fucks at this point. I'm
Yeah.
actually reading The Body Keeps the Score by Bessel van der Kolk, which is a book about PTSD, right? And she's like, oh, interesting, I'm reading this other book, something about complex PTSD. Okay, so that's really weird. So the only reason we even wound up dating is because we had this weird connection about we're both reading the book. And so she was very deep in the trauma theory and all that stuff. And I was kind of getting into it. And then the pandemic hit, and I went a different direction, and I really went into like the environmental health side of things, the light, the EMFs and stuff. And she really dug deep on the trauma stuff. And
Mm.
so we diverged, and that was actually a pain point in our relationship because I'm not into therapy, like in like talk therapy and stuff, and like at all. I've been harmed by it, and this, which is not to say that it can't work for other people. I'm not dogmatic. I'm just saying
Okay.
it didn't work for me, and so I was looking for another way, and I got 90% of the way by focusing on other things, primarily the environmental health and getting more in tune with nature and cyclical, like seasonal, daily, etc., light cycles and temperature cycles and everything. And just kind of, I got 90% of the way there, but maybe even more than 90% of the way there. But ultimately, nervous system is not quite going to get repaired just doing that stuff. So, yeah.
Do you think like that relationship was the teacher of the universe, if you will, to like say, hey, Peter, you might want to keep looking in this area or this direction or this, like, was it more of a lesson for you in the sense of a mirror, so many
Yeah.
people, because I feel like so many people have relationships, whether they're, sexual or friendship or whatever, and they don't see it as a mirrored reflection of them. And
Yeah.
I believe that relationships are a mirror in some way.
Yeah.
So did you recognize that? And like after, that relationship had ended, because I think it directly relates to, the kind of experience you have in a relationship, the trauma that stays with you, like going and being with others now, like, does that, like, obviously it doesn't affect you, but just for others that have been in maybe experiences like that.
I love that you said mirror because I think of her as my soul mirror, and I still do.
Mm.
Like we're not talking right now, but only because it's too difficult.
Mhm.
And yeah, I didn't realize that as it was happening at all.
Mm.
And in fact, I think I intentionally pushed her away because that was easier than facing the fact that it wasn't really working, and that we both needed to get out of the relationship to become who we needed to become.
Totally.
Which is such a painful thing to realize. Like, I don't even like saying it. It's such a painful thing. But I think she intuitively knew that more than I did, because I'm a single dad. I had a full-time job and a girlfriend who was doing her own full-time job, starting her own business, and really focused on her wellness and like healing. And so at that time, at least I had a story that I didn't have time to work on that stuff myself. Maybe it wasn't just time. Maybe it was not lack of willingness to go there too. Like, I don't want to rewrite the past, but at any point, I was not doing that at the time. And I think I just kind of shut down and pushed her away. And we both we needed that. And it led to where I am now, like all these things. So it wasn't until, and so, right, actually the day that we're going to get a little bit heavy here. The day that we broke up was a super moon. It was the biggest moon in like the past 12 years or something like that.
Wow. I'm so glad you brought that. Was where I was going to go next, is like, what's the astrology play here? And like, I know you saw Pluto in Aquarius because it loops in with spirituality and this higher force.
Yeah.
But continue. Sorry.
Yeah, no, I mean, and I love that you brought up astrology, because so the supermoon happened, we broke up, and the reason I remember is because I went camping and we loved to go look at the stars and couldn't see any stars, Mm. But also that week, a very, very close friend of mine took his own life. And so it was like a 1-2 punch. And
I'm so sorry.
Yeah, no, I mean, so me and Allie, we wound up like getting together one more time just to like, I was unable to grieve. And so I called her and she's like, just come over, and like we talked, and I was able to do some grieving, and then it shut down again, and just life got really busy. And so again, I'm losing track of the question you asked me, but so it wasn't until like getting to that point of like, okay, I'm forcing things down. I'm trying to control everything. I'm like doing a remodel, quitting my job, starting business, and school district is on strike. So my kids are at home, and like 3 or 4 other things. And I'm managing the remodel myself because I don't want to pay a contractor. And, I can do it all. And like, actually you can't do it all. And I had one of those health breakdowns again, but I was feeling so good physically. It wasn't a physical health breakdown. It was like a spiritual health breakdown. And the kind of apex of that cycle was, I was also having like kind of co-parenting issues and issues with my kids, and my older daughter was really addicted to her phone. And I was, anyway, at some point, everything just like built up, and I don't recommend doing this to anyone, but she was lying about her phone usage. I looked at her screen time, and I got so angry that I smashed her phone. And it sucks. Like, I apologize. We're good. Like, but that was a moment I was like, wait a minute, I'm really healthy here, but something's not right. And I had made an appointment with this craniosacral person, just kind of feeling something's off. I better make an appointment. And so the day after I smashed the phone, it happened to be the day of the appointment. And
look at that.
There's a little bit of a story here. Do you want to hear it?
Please.
Okay. So my ex-girlfriend and I had agreed not to talk to each other, and that I could send her a letter if I wanted to, but after 3 months, and I was, you know what, I'm just easier to let it go. It's just easier, it's in the past. And I had never unfriended her on Instagram. So I had unfollowed her, or I don't see her posts, but every time you go to your DMs, it shows you the people that you've DM'd most at the top. So every time I go there, I just see her icon, and like when she was active last. And finally I'm like, you know what, I'm going to block her just to make it easier. And I live next to this really beautiful, like 200-acre forest park. And I'm walking through the park, and I'm just feeling her presence, like tangible. Like, I'm sure like I'm going to see her around every corner. And so that's when I blocked it. I was like, I can't handle this anymore. And then I had gone crabbing with some friends, and I had some crabs. So I wanted to make this crab dish where you take the shell off and you put hot sake in it and you cook it over a. It's amazing. I
Wow.
needed the sake, and I was just kind of procrastinating. And finally, I decided, I'm going to go to the store. It's now or never. I needed to use the bathroom. I didn't use the bathroom. I'll use it at the store. And it's nighttime. It's wintertime, and I get down to the stoplight at the end of my street, and there's a car. And this time, I'm deep, deep, deep in circadian practices, and I'm the second the sun's down, lights are off, and I'll light some candles.
Yeah.
And so the car in front of me has this bumper sticker that says, "I'd rather be at home with my candles." And I'm like, "Whoa, that's cool." And so I'm curious. I'm following the car, and it's dark, so I can't see anything. And the car's driving aggressively, and I live in Portland is very much like the Prius driver, just like, "Oh no, I better not go," kind of thing. Like,
Totally.
I like to drive not too aggressive, but like just take the initiative. And
Yeah.
so this car is doing that. I'm like, who is this candle like loving aggressive driver? And so I get to a stop sign. And I'm just going to take a picture of the license plate just because I'm going to have to go to my store pretty soon. And maybe I'll see this car again. But I'm also like, maybe I should just follow the car. But I get to my turn. So I go to the store and like, whatever, if it's meant to be, it was meant to be. I get to the store and I pull up my phone because I had written a shopping list on there. And I see a text and it's from Allie. And it says, "Hey, just FYI, I was in the car in front of you. That was me." And she didn't have a car when we were dating, so that was like and that goes into, I'm not even going to go, like, it goes into a whole other series of stories. But so then I go to the craniosacral and I tell her the story, and she sends me an email the next day. She's like, "I went home and the car with the bumper sticker was outside my house." And so anyway, so at this point I'm like, okay, I've been forcing things my whole life. I can't do it anymore. Like, there's something else is guiding me now, and I need to figure out how to follow that. So that's really, to finally answer your question. I think for a lot of people, you kind of need to hit the wall enough times or whatever, like, to really get it imprinted into you that you are not in control. And there's something bigger, and you have a bigger purpose here. And the answer is actually in releasing control and surrendering to that. And that's a scary thing in a way, but also once you do it, it's so freeing. And the kind of peace that you get, just internal peace, is, I don't even know how to describe it. It's amazing. And I'm not to say I'm perfect. I'm not. I'm still do a lot of
We all are.
we all are, right? We're all working
Totally.
progress. Yeah. So I think that is a piece that I think is missing in the whole wellness space. And it's not to say that people in the space don't practice that. There is a lot of kind of BSE spiritual, like, I think they call it bypassing kind of stuff, and just kind of like, cargo cult spirituality. Well, if you do X, Y, Z, then you'll, and it's like, no, you actually really have to surrender. You really do. And you can't just go through some motions here. I'm at the point now where I think that might be the most important aspect of health. All the optimization that we do, like, yeah, if you're sick and stuff, yes, and they're all important, and you want to live your life in tune with nature and all these good things. But if you reach that kind of surrender place and you're at peace with yourself, all the other stuff just kind of, it just flows. It's, you have to force it.
Why are you putting such a big emphasis on the spiritual layer? And I'm only asking this not because trying to pick it apart. I actually agree with you. It's just intriguing when you have someone like you that has such deep knowledge about the hard sciences, if you will, that come to this conclusion. Because I was recently talking with my really good friend. He's a particle physicist. He's very ingrained in the whole physics culture. He's previously from the USSR. He's actually in Oregon too.
Oh, cool.
And he was we were talking about this quote. I forget who said it. I think it was one of the mathematicians that was working with Einstein. And he said something along the lines of, once you get to a place of like depth and knowledge, you come to this like understanding where, one, the higher forces are undeniable, but then two, with that knowing, it's almost like kind of really lonely because you can't talk to many people that hold that same like fundamental knowledge, but also that like more existential, if you will, kind of outlook on life. So why do you place like such a high value on like the spiritual layer and how like much it affects our body and our mind and our everyday life? And even I would say like so many don't think about life like that. I think they think about it the reverse. Like if I'm healthy, then everything else should be good. I'm going to go to, heaven or whatever you believe in. But we don't think about the reverse, the reverse engineering of that framework where it's like, are you spiritually in tune and connected for whatever that means for you, which then could, potentially open up other doors and allow, our biological signals to flow better. So what's your thinking and like, why is there such a precedence on that?
Well, first, I love that you're talking about this physicist friend who's like, I think that's a very common thing. And there's a quote. It's something like, when you take the first sip from the glass of the natural sciences, like I started as an atheist, but by the time I got to the bottom of the cup, I was seeing God. Like, I think it's an apocryphal quote, but it's good, And I think there is something to like getting so deep into the sciences and realizing, what, we just don't understand. Like, we can harness our knowledge to create technology and so on and so forth. But I think the deeper you get into there, if you're kind of spiritually tuned in, it's almost like, well, why are we even doing this? Like, where is this technology going to get us? And we really are in an age right now where we're that technology is getting to the point where it's as magical as the spiritual stuff. Like, it appears as magical, but maybe it's actually alienating us from the spiritual side. So I think the reason I emphasize the spiritual stuff so much is to get back to an earlier question you asked, is because I hit that peak health and my sleep kept on getting worse and worse and worse and worse, to the point where I was up for like 3 hours in the middle of the night every night.
Oh my
and
God.
I'm still feeling really good because I was doing everything right otherwise. And like, I even had like blood panels from the time. I like really, really good blood markers. Like, I think what happened is I realized is you can optimize all you want, but if you have like a spiritual deficit of any sort and it hasn't been addressed, it's going to override all those things in some way. And for me, the sleep is the Achilles heel. For somebody else, it might be their heart. They might have a heart attack. And like, this is where I try to stray away from explaining, but like, there is like German new medicine and other things that have done a lot of work connecting emotions to illness and different organ systems, and Chinese medicine too. And so I don't know enough about that specifically to say, other than my personal experience is that there's something to that. And since addressing the spiritual side, the physical side just doesn't matter as much. It really doesn't. And I'm almost like taking less care of myself physically in service of the spiritual side right now. And I don't think that's a good idea long term. And I'm probably going to stop sometime soon. Just the 49ers thing just took off. And I was like, it's not an accident that I wound up on that story. It wasn't some luck thing. It was me surrendering and following the path. And that's where it led me. And so maybe for me, maybe my purpose on this life is to open up that thread. And maybe it's not to optimize my health and live to 97 years old and whatever, and I don't know, like, I don't have a goal, and I do want to like live a long, healthy life, but I just kind of think there's something empty about that way of thinking.
Yeah. I think when, if our KPI of living a good life is the age that we live to, I personally know my great grandmother was 100, and her age didn't mean shit to her happiness. She was still a grumpy old lady, until the end, causing fights and everything. A smile here and there, but that wasn't surely the KPI of the quality of life she had. But it's ironic also. The person I was talking about, my friend Igor, he's actually writing a published article that's going to be coming out soon, talking about the human body as a transceiver. And the USSR did a lot of work on this and a lot of research beyond that about how these different practitioners, they were actually kind of, to what you're saying, in order to achieve that, those more depth in the spiritual world, if you will, and that more connectedness, that they were actually losing temperature in their torso, redirecting temperature to their hands, and really interesting different metrics that were happening biologically, as the person was, spiritually moving an object or thinking about something. And it's the whole paper is essentially how we think that we're drawing from this life force, but the body is the vessel, and it could be depleted because the life force, if you will, or the spiritual energy that from a higher dimension that we're drawing from is so powerful that like it literally drains us to a point where like you're neglecting the physical because the spiritual is it's such a high. It literally is like, I haven't done many drugs, but like, getting that high. And it's just fascinating when you think about the dualism between that like etheric layer and then the biology that is occurring within us, and then also with other living, plants, animals. We all feel different vibes, if you will, of these different living beings. So it's fascinating when you go into that, and like from your personal experience, you're actually like witnessing that shift of not monkhood where you want to you almost do want to completely surrender, but unfortunately, like you have kids and you have to, pay bills, and we all have to like be here, but there is that interesting dualism, when you think about the spectrum of complete surrendering, like a monk, for example, to like the people that, are almost like robotic because they are so stimulated by the artificial. And I think the technology is, like you said, it's something that we can certainly work with, but I think there is a very fine line of when it almost becomes like a drug. It's like there are some drugs that are good for you, but you overuse it and it's like it's not going to help you. Or just like anything, it's a habit. Like, see that relation in my head, that it's a very fine line of how we are using it and how is it serving us versus hurting us.
Yeah, I mean, that's a big thread in my life and my work, honestly, is the idea of technology. And like I mentioned how like I was a hacker for several years and then I just got rid of it completely. And and I got into music and I played piano, which has no electronical components at all. I just sat at the piano for 8 hours a day.
Wow.
Playing. And like I think what you said, like I like to think about it as technology. Are you using the technology, or is the technology using you? Is the framework that I think about. And right now, for most people, the technology is using you. And it happens to me too. Again, like I'm not trying to say I'm some elevated person. And I think like that thing you said between monks on one side and just like robotic NPCs that are just like tapped into the consumerist, like overstimulation culture. There's a lot of room in between those two for just normal people who want to live their life in tune with whatever, if it's a divine spirit or God, whatever word, the universe. I like to say God. I'm kind of like, it took me a long time to feel comfortable saying that word. I think it's a powerful word. To me, there's not another word that really has that power that conveys the same thing, but I'm not dogmatic. Just living your normal life and having a spiritual practice of some sort and surrendering. This doesn't mean you have to let go and like become a monk and like go live in the Himalayas or wherever. There's a lot of room for just taking a step back, getting away from all the distractions and tuning into your own intuition. And then you'll know where it's going to take you.
Yeah, I love that you said it's almost like the spectrum. I think we live in such a society that's like a one size fits all. It's like select this option and you are this output. It's like you were experiencing that in your health journey. You would go to the doctor, you're telling them the symptom, they're saying, nope, it doesn't match any of my knowledge of what I understand of the body. And it's like, yeah, there are some frameworks that are, general, like, we could say go in the sunlight, watch your rhythm, circadian sleep. And there are, there is a toolbox, if you will, of frameworks and protocols and things that you should look at. But I think it's, again, not in our best interest to always be talking about solutions and like our experiences like X is the way because it's worked for me. It's like, no, that's one thing that didn't necessarily align with you and you had to, uncover something else. But for someone else, it might be their sunlight, and not their sleep, like you mentioned. And I think the more that we are empathetic to that like, okay, we're looking at everything as a system and like someone's wheel, might be broken a different place than another person. And it's just recognizing that and, bringing that into the world that there is this holistic body of knowledge. And it starts, I think, with some faith, spirituality, God, and then I think it trickles on from there because if you're disconnected from something that is like a higher force, then in my opinion, you're also disconnected from like your purpose in life, your passion. I mean, not that you need to have that answer. Like I don't know how to verbalize exactly what my purpose is, but I kind of feel it intuitively and, act in that way. But the more disconnected I think you are from that faith and that higher level God, I think you lose a lot in your life, and you're more disconnected, if you will, and between others, with yourself, with how your body operates. The list goes on.
Yeah, I love that you said that. And like to be fair, the other side of the coin is the people who kind of co-opt God for their own purposes.
Oh
Like,
yeah,
but
God bless you, and you're like you're actually the worst person
yeah,
out of all of us.
yeah, and but just to say it takes all types. But with the yeah, like I like what you said about not knowing exactly what your purpose because I can't tell you like in a sentence or two what my purpose is. All I can tell you is that when I'm aligned and I'm surrendering and following the doors that are opening for me and not butting my head against the wall trying to force some outcome that I became attached to, I get an outsized result from my work, such as posting an article on my Substack and Twitter that gets 22 million views and starts an international news story. And that was just an example of me just following where the energy was leading me and not forcing it. And so that doesn't mean I know what comes next. I don't. I'm actually still a little bit lost, honestly. I'm working on it, but
I feel like as much as we can all be sure, there's like a percentage of us, if we do agree with this higher force, that is always like a little lost, if you will.
yeah,
Whether we're willing to admit that or not. You could be super secure and you still don't really know where we all go after the end of this. Like we have faith in what it is, but we don't really know. Like there is no empirical data that's telling us this is the way and this is how it maps out to be, which is humbling when you think about, the scope of the world. But you because you mentioned it, the whole 49ers piece, I'm sure that's how a lot of people know you. But for people that have never like read about the harmful effects of like in the invisible, if you will, the EMFs, Bluetooth, the sunlight, we see the sun, but we don't recognize like sunlight can actually help us. For people that are not really knowledgeable about that, why should they care about like an article like yours uncovering that correlation that you made with the 49ers and their injuries and then the electrical substation? Because for people that it has nothing to do with the action. Like it's not about the NFL. You know what I mean? Like they're just, if you will, the case study that you're highlighting for this, what I will say, chronic exposure to EMFs. But for someone that doesn't know, like, why should they care? Like, obviously it has outsized health effects, but can you kind of just give us like a little
analysis? I'm going to go slightly a different direction just because you talked about us being like a transceiver.
Mm-hmm.
So when I kind of hit my peak health, it was because I was really focusing on the water in my body. And so we talk about easy water. Are you familiar with that term?
Yeah.
So just for a high level, yeah, geropolic. So for people who don't know, basically the water inside your body it's in a gel-like form, and it's almost like ice, but ice is like a three-dimensional grid and of hexagonal structured molecules. The gel form, it's like layers. So they're connected, let's just say horizontally, but not vertically. So it's kind of solid, but it can kind of move. And it creates a semiconductor. So the theory in quantum biology is you build the easy water, and that lets the energy flow, and it doesn't just move electrons; it can move all sort of different, energy. And so then you have the work of people like Veda Austin showing that you can change the crystalline structure of water with your thoughts and your emotions. And so my take is just in general on the transceiver idea is that I think you can almost make your antenna more powerful by making that water more structured and healthier. And I think that's what happened to me partially. And then you're just more in tune with your environment. But then on the other side is like you mentioned, well, what about these other things? So there's evidence that EMF degrades the water in two ways. One is by reducing your mitochondrial function so that it creates less water. And in the process of creating less water, it creates more free radicals, also known as radical oxygen species, which leads to oxidative stress, DNA damage, cell damage, etc., degraded mitochondrial function, disease. So there's that. And that's, I would say, pretty non-controversial in the literature. But then the other side of, well, how do the EMFs actually affect the water in your body? There's evidence. So the easy water, just to give people a visual, so you're most of the surfaces like in your cells and stuff are what we call hydrophilic, meaning they attract water. And so you can do a study with a substance called Nafion, which is hydrophilic. You put it in a petri dish, you put the water in there, and it will attract the water to it. And it does something called charge separation. So the water that gets structured is on one side, and then the water that remains what they call in bulk form is on the other side. And then there's kind of a line between it, and it works like a battery. Negative charge on one side, positive charge on the other. And so when we talk about building our easy water, we're basically saying we're going to make our battery stronger. There is evidence, and they did a study. It's a preprint though, and so it didn't ever go to peer review. They put the petri dish with a Nafion and the structured water next to a Wi-Fi router, and I believe it was just the beacon signal, so not even like a YouTube video or something streaming. And they showed that it degraded the structure of the easy water so that there was less of the negatively charged side and more of the bulk positive charged side. And so in a way, when we're exposing ourselves to EMFs, not only are we degrading the mitochondrial function, but we're actually taking that water and making it less structured. And so we're just reducing the charge of our battery.
I love the battery analogy. I think that's super helpful for people because that's literally how the mitochondria operates, right? I mean, I'm not no nerdy scientist, but from my understanding, it's literally the battery power of our cells, if you will. It's also fascinating to we work at our lab with biophotons and seeing how that is directly impacting different biological states. Just like you mentioned, when you're introducing a coherent signal into something that's disrupted, it allows that flow, it allows everything to flow better and to be more coherent, if you will. And in a society that is constantly degrading, I think we need to look at what, the different ways that we could become more coherent, whether it's, spiritually, and then, all the effects after that. All the different tools that you have to think about after that. One of the more interesting things that I would love if you can touch on is the technology and like the biology concept, like Neuralink. I'm fascinated by it, about what it can do for the people that truly need it. You know what I mean? Like, making people, allowing them to move that are paralyzed and stuff like that. But I'm also like very weary, like, okay, I know tech, anything that is connected could be hacked. So are we talking about like now this person could potentially be hacked, if you will? I mean, like, I'm not sure. So can you maybe dive into some of the things that maybe you're seeing or like what interests what is interesting most to you about this correlation between the two subjects, because I think they're a lot more connected than we think. Even when you study, you mentioned that experience with your daughter. I think that's a wide majority of people are addicted to, their phones and stuff. But, I was reading, and blue light is literally an addictive, form of light. So it's literally shaping your biology to be addicted to it. So
Yep. Yep. And they know it too.
totally. I mean, I listened to something, one of the creators, he's got a company, it's called Daylight Co. And they have a really cool device. Anj, he was on,
yeah, we're friends.
He was on a podcast, and he was talking about how Steve Jobs didn't let his kids use iPads. And I'm like, wait, the creator of the iPad, or, Apple, is not allowing his children to use the device because he thinks it's that harmful? Like, hello, red flag here.
Red flag. Yeah.
Yeah.
All across the board. It's not just him, it's Gates too. And like, I heard Peter Thiel on a little excerpt from a talk, and I guess he's kids. I don't know. He had kids. And somebody asked they said, we heard that you have pretty strict that a lot of people in tech have pretty strict screen time limitations for their kids. Is that the case? And if so, what are your limitations? And he's like, yeah. He goes on a little bit, and he's like, we give our kids an hour and a half a week. And the whole audience gasped, because that's not a lot of screen time as far as averages go, right?
No, that is, oh my gosh. You take the iPad away from one kid in a restaurant, and he's screaming his head off at 3 years old. You're like, you can't even barely talk, and you know what the skip button is on YouTube? Like, I'm confused here, buddy.
Exactly. So to answer your question though, like, I think that's the fundamental question right now of our times. Like you talked about astrology, like we're going into the age of Aquarius right now, which is kind of like a high-tech cerebral, it's the air sign. And I got an Aquarius rising, by the way.
I'm a Leo rising.
What's that?
I'm a Leo rising.
So I'm Leo sun, Aquarius rising. So anyway, I'm not a huge astrology nerd. I think it's a really beautiful system now, and I think there's some ancient wisdom to it. And every time I've kind of tapped into it, it always kind of leads me somewhere. So right now, though, so it's a very timely question. Mark, what's his name? Mark Andreessen, the guy who created the Mozilla browser, the first commercial web browser, Netscape. He's a big VC guy in Silicon Valley.
He just posted a couple of days ago, right, about introspection, or something like that. He's blowing up.
He's getting ratioed right now.
Yes,
because first of all, he said introspection when he meant rumination, but he's doubling down on introspection. But anyway, it doesn't matter. The other thing he said in that interview, or maybe it was an adjacent interview, was talking about how the risks, or maybe he referred to Peter Thiel, the risks of founders using psychedelics. And so I think it's interesting that we're at a time when we have this. Like we said, we were talking about spirituality versus technology. I put the psychedelic stuff more on the spirituality side. It's like, it can be a technology in a way, like if it's manipulated, like reduced, but these are things that have tradition for thousands of years. So like if you're doing ayahuasca, that's one thing. If you're doing straight up DMT 5 or what, 5, like that's, maybe we'll put that in the technology side.
Yeah.
And so we have, again, this dichotomy of like, there's like kind of an emerging feeling that like of this kind of mass shared consciousness, and there's the psychedelic side, and then there's this internet side of like we're all this like internet hive mind. So it's like it's this dualism of like the good and the bad of that idea. And so you asked about Neuralink, and so I think about Neuralink. If you're blind or paralyzed or whatever, and it can give you function that you didn't have, that's amazing. And also it makes me think, well, let's look at a time when we didn't live in such a high-tech modern society. What would that person who was blind, what purpose would they serve? What could we learn from them? What are we taking away by giving them vision? And like, which is not to say we shouldn't do it, but it's to say we should always ask that question. And I see it like a similar thing with like, do you have kids?
I do not. Not yet.
When you have kids, one of the standard things that they want you to do, like 13 weeks in or so, is get they sample the amniotic fluid. So they stick a needle into the womb because they want to find out if there's any birth effects or mental retardation. What's
Mhm.
the term they use? Down syndrome. Sorry, I'm 80s. Like,
Yeah, I'm with you. I'm like, what is the proper term that they're talking about these kids nowadays? What do they use? Mental health? I don't
yeah,
know.
who knows? And so the idea is like you would want to know if you're having a kid with Down syndrome, so you can abort the baby. And so now most people with Down syndrome are actually aborted instead of being born,
Wow.
and which is like, just politics aside, just thinking about that, if you've ever had someone with Down syndrome in your life, like they're just a real joy to be around, and they bring something. And I know they suffer too. Like I don't want to play that down. Like we all suffer, and we all have learned things from the suffering. So like, what are you losing? Politics aside, I just don't want to do politics. But what are you losing? So I think about like technology. Is it, are you using it, or are you being
Mhm.
used? Maybe we're being used and we're going to help somebody's individual life and reduce the collective spirit somehow, because we're no longer learning those lessons that we need to learn. And I'm not trying to say I know the answer, but I'm saying we better ask the question. And if you put me in that situation and I'm blind and I'm offered eyesight, maybe I'm going to choose it. Like, like,
Yeah.
and then you hear Elon Musk talking about it, and he said, this is just the first wave. The second wave is we're going to tap into the blah blah blah, and you're going to be able to use the Neuralink to see better than somebody with perfect vision. It's going to be like more colorful and blah. I was like, so now it's like taking a psychedelic, but with your Neuralink. And so that's where it's headed. And it's, again, it's that dualism of like ancient
Mm.
wisdom, like ancient, like we can still call them technologies, because like somebody had to discover them, especially
Mhm.
ayahuasca. And like, how did they discover that you mix those two plants? Like, I don't honestly think it was trial and error. I think somebody got a vision from God or something and was instructed to combine those things, because we needed to tap into that channel in a very specific way that's now being used to, like, people fly to Costa Rica or wherever and like have your spiritual awakening, and it's all wrapped in a pretty package. Like, no shade. I'm just like, that's where it turns from like this ancient spiritual thing to a more like modern consumerist thing. And then you go a step further and you're like, you can have Neuralink if you're not blind, and we can show you the prettiest pictures in your brain, and you'll never like lack for stimulation. And again, though, is that what we need, when you can just go outside and listen to the birds and like watch a hummingbird, get its the pollen from the flower, and like watch the morning glories come up? And so that's the contradiction of the age we live in. And I know a lot of people like are kind of predicting that there's going to be bifurcation. The people that are just like tapped in are going to go one direction, and the people that are not tapped in, that are just kind of like plugged in,
Mm.
just like directly to their brain, are going to, like, I think the Zoomers call it bed rotting these days, where they lie in bed and they just scroll all day. And like, I tend to think like we're probably going to hit a wall as a culture, and things will change because we'll be forced to. And it's like, that's how change always happens.
Yeah. I think that question that you bring up, like, what are we gaining and what are we losing from introducing a technology like a Neuralink? I think both questions need to be asked, and it's actually interesting. I'm going to ask that question. I have a friend of mine. His name is Frankie. He has cerebral palsy, but he's nonverbal. But he has a talking pad where
Yeah.
he can talk. But he's written plays before. He's written books. And he has a very interesting background, and he is super knowledgeable, one of the smartest people that I know. But he cannot do anything by himself, and he's completely ridden to a chair, and he needs help for everything. Like, cannot do anything by himself. And he has a lot of interesting insights about, like, he doesn't want to change his position. He thinks that he's a beacon of light, if you will, to show others, that you could be. He's literally nonverbal, and he's written plays before. So like, everyone's first question is like, how, and like, where do you get your ideas? And like, he can't just pop open a computer and go on the internet. Like, he needs to have someone there to be able to literally use the mouse and scroll. Like, he's completely dependent. But it's a fascinating question. I think we cannot ignore that question, especially when we think we're doing good for others by, like, hey, like, you're blind, like, we're going to let you see, but they also have autonomy. And are we,
Right.
recognizing that? And also, when we think about the greater good, politics aside, I would say greater good, like spiritually, consciously trying to evolve people. Is it the best thing for us?
Yeah.
It also, is it up to us to decide? Maybe it's up to every individual person,
Yeah.
however they decide to live their life, or go through their experiences with or without technology like a Neuralink. But then on one side, you brought up the ancient technologies like a psychedelic, like an ayahuasca or a 5-MeO DMT, which the kids are, whatever, they're all biohacking nowadays, but it's literally found in our brain. But beyond that, it's a very fine line of what technology is trying to replicate and what you could get naturally, if you will, if you put yourself through different protocols.
Yeah.
I know personally I've experienced hallucinations and stuff doing just breath work sessions,
Yeah.
just how you're channeling your breath in the different techniques that you're using in a specific session. So it's really interesting when you talk about that aspect of life and like the autonomy layer.
I have a thought about the autonomy thing, if you don't mind.
Yeah.
And it ties into the technology thing. So I was reading I'm really interested in like the technology stuff. I think for the most part, you have people that are like our culture is tech obsessed, and like any progress, anything new is exciting. And it's like the economy is built on it. And then you have the more like Luddite side where like it's just bad.
Yeah.
And I'm more sympathetic to that side in a way, like spiritually and philosophically, but I'm also like, I'm always checking out the new tech because I'm curious. I'm like, how's this going to affect us? So there's an author named Neil Postman who wrote a book. You know him?
Yes.
I think it's called Technocracy. And it's one of the best books I've ever read. Everybody should just go buy it right now. Sadly, he has been kind of memory hold. For whatever reason, people don't talk about his work anymore. He wrote another book called Amusing Ourselves to Death, which was written before the internet. And it's all about how this consuming of technology is going to be our demise. He was a hardcore Luddite, but he was philosophically asking the right questions. So I think about this stuff. And one thing I was researching was, what did the introduction of the mirror do to people, our culture? And the answer is out there. And so the idea of autonomy didn't really exist until we had mirrors and people could see themselves, because we didn't see ourselves as separate from the community we were with. So you can ask the question and say, this, my friend who's got cerebral palsy, and he's like, we can give him the tools to be autonomous now. And that's really great in the context of the culture and society that we live in right now. Let's go back in time to that pre-mirror when autonomy wasn't even really a word that maybe people outside of the most higher echelons of society, kings and stuff, and even then, like, they had servants and stuff. They weren't autonomous, but like, they could be. Everybody else, their fates were intricately tied together. There was no autonomy. So we're like, even then we're answering the question that we're only asking because of the conditions that we're asking it from. Mm-hmm. And so you can think about that as from any technology, like the clock is a great one. And so, but I don't like, your friend is what a beautiful story. Like, don't want to take that away from it. It's just back to asking those questions. And so, God, there was a question. I was like a tangent from your question. I can't remember what it was though. Because you didn't ask a question. You were just talking. You were talking about the ayahuasca and
the ancient, like, it's a very fine line between like the ancient technologies that we've seen and then the technologies that we're trying to biohack. 5-MeO DMT, you take the substance, well, it's already found within us, but there's a fine line between using that. Sparky.
Yeah, so I thank you for reminding. So I think it's unfortunate that most of the anti-tech voices are just kind of anti-everything. And like, so right now people are anti-data centers and whatever. Like, I'm not a fan of data centers, but I do use AI. And like, honestly, like, even if you don't use AI, you're still using the data centers because every service you're using is using AI. So it's like, and like, it's about the water, and it's like they'll just find whatever issue that they can kind of latch onto that resonates with people, which more power to them. Like, that's politics. But I want us to have like a more philosophical approach and asking like the questions you're asking, And so the filter that I use is a friend of mine, is we ask, okay, whatever we're dealing with, what how does it apply to the wisdom of the ancients? And it's just kind of like, the ancients weren't perfect, obviously, and they did a lot of ignorant things, and human sacrifice and all this stuff. And if there's something that they practice that is still around in some form, it's probably a good thing. And so I think we can apply that to things like ayahuasca and stuff, and versus what is 5-MeO DMT and biohacking. And like, loved what you said about naturally doing like meditation and breath work and getting to those hallucinatory states. I actually, so after I had that session, after the phone breaking and everything, I had always thought I wanted to do ayahuasca. And so I asked a friend, and she set me up with someone.
Wow.
And I wanted to do it. And so I set it up, and we had the date and everything. And then the woman who practices it, she 6 weeks before the event, she sends out an email with all the instructions. And I got the email, and it was on the wrong date. And I was like, what happened here? We had a miscommunication. I got my kids that weekend. I can't do it. So I kind of foot dragged, and said, okay, the timing wasn't great for me anyway. I'm going to set up another session. It turned out that was March. The next one came in September. And so I set that one up. And about 2 weeks before that session, my mom called and said, it was her 80th birthday that year. She's like, I want you to come down. I'm going to decided last minute to do a party. Guess which day it's on? It's on the day. And so I emailed the lady and just like, hey, FYI, I gotta fly down for my mom's birthday. And I can't do it. And she's like, oh, that's interesting. What day is your mom's birthday? Oh, it's the same day as the session. And no, she asked what year. And I said, 1944. And she goes, that's my birthday. And her name is my mom's name. And so I'm just like, what's going on here? And so
Yeah.
I was not going to do a session with her, because I was like, it's not going to work out. It's not working out. So then I thought, okay, I got busy again. And in December, ran into my ex-girlfriend, the same person. And we were talking about ayahuasca. She had done it, and she had sent me a really beautiful email after she did it. And so I was asking her about it, and I decided to sign up again. And a week before the session, I panicked. I was like, I can't do this. I cannot, like, I don't know why. I mean, I wasn't
scary.
scared. I just, like, something fell off. I guess maybe it is scary, but, and so I called the ex-girlfriend, and she talked me through her experience, just so I had some more context. Because a lot of people who do this stuff like really like tripping.
Yeah.
And I knew that she doesn't do it for those reasons. She's like working on her nervous system and stuff. And so she talked about the ledge, and I thought, okay, I'll do it. And the day before the session, 2 days before, we had a snowstorm. And I'm looking at the weather forecast, like, I don't even know if this is going to happen, if I can get there. But I prepared for it. It's like a potluck. So I managed to get down to the store and got the food that I needed. But then I got home, and I couldn't find my wallet, or my wallet, credit card. One of the two, I can't remember. And there's a whole other tangent. Like, I had 3 days ago, 3 days before that, I had sat with my ex-girlfriend, came over, and we did this spirit animal card. Yeah. And I pulled the card that was the busy bee, and it's like, you're working too hard. You need a vacation. So anyway, the day is, I got the food. I can't find my wallet. So I wound up like using my phone to buy the food, because you can do like Apple Pay or whatever. Mm-hmm. Got back home before, and then the snow started melting. So I realized it's going to happen. And I'm just like, I'm fine with it. I'm cool with it. It's great. And right at 3 p.m., an hour and a half before it's going to start, I get an email from the woman saying it's canceled. We can't do it. And not explaining why. And it wasn't from the snowstorm. It wasn't from the snowstorm. And so that was the third time I tried to do ayahuasca. Couldn't do it, but wound up stuck at my house. I couldn't find my wallet. I couldn't go anywhere. And I wound up getting that vacation that the busy bee wanted me to get. That was kind of like a long way to say, like, I had my own series of what I would call, I don't like the term hallucinations, because it's not exactly right.
Yeah. Visions,
downloads, like messages that I received and I received them that week, some very powerful ones that weekend on the night
Wow.
that I was supposed to do ayahuasca. And I wouldn't have had that if I did the ayahuasca. So like, there's this back to that, like letting go of control, not trying to force things. Like I was trying to force that ayahuasca thing because I was also like seeing patterns and then, well, I better, even though I didn't want to do this one, she had my mom's birthday and it must be meant to be. And then it
Yeah.
comes up and like God intervenes, like, no, you can't do this right now. We need you for something else. And
I
so,
think,
yeah,
yeah,
go ahead.
that just like the more that from my experiences in my life, like the more forceful I've tried to be, the outcome was like a lot different than I thought. The more forceful that I was, and like the more that I've just like surrendered, if you will, to like life and allowing, like I would have never recognized those patterns prior. I would have totally tried to like force it, like, oh my gosh, she has my mom's birthday,
Mhm.
like, and she has my mom's name. I need to find a way. I'll keep trying her till the day I
Yeah,
die.
yeah,
But it's like, wait a minute, when you take that step back, and you're not, your ego's aside and you're trying to just analyze, it's like, wait a minute, maybe this is divine intervention, if you will, because I don't believe in coincidences. I think everything happens for a reason. And, you could bring in physics into that and like quantum entanglement and how that's
yeah,
all orchestrated in that layer. But it's undeniable when you have experiences like that, there's some guiding force that is pushing you, like, okay, if you really needed it, I feel like it would have, you would have fell into that. And obviously,
yeah,
life would have allowed there to be no friction for that path to occur.
yeah,
But maybe, you don't need it, clearly, and you could get similar downloads and messages from just being open and like having that silence or that time to not be the busy bee and be,
right.
create the space. I actually read something. I'll send you the book. Actually, it's a really good one. It's called In Praise of Wasting Time by Alan Littman.
Oh,
It's
cool.
like maybe 30 pages. It's from a TED talk
Okay.
that he gave, but it's a whole book about how we're all, oh, like, how are we optimizing our time and yada yada. And some of the best moments that we could, chalk, look at our life on, come from us sitting on the park bench and like running into that random person, or
Mhm.
like someone falling over in front of you and you going to help them. And then it sparks a cascade of events that you never thought were possible. And it's a very enlightening, especially it's a nice perspective, especially in this day and age that you're trying to always keep up with the next AI development and what's going on with these companies and the world and all that, where it's nice to just know that some of our best wisdom, if you will, comes from the stillness and the silence,
I think most
which I
of it
think,
does.
yeah, I agree. In my older age now, I am realizing it's uncomfortable at first, but I definitely get a lot more when I have the ear pods in, but I'm not listening. I'm just like, it's a fake
Right.
out. It's like, so
Yeah.
the
It's
others
like,
don't talk to me. It's like, no, I'm not available to be in a conversation, but nothing's going on here. That's my way. Peter, one last question. Is there anything that you're newly into or really interested in, like this phase of your life, these past few months, and like after maybe everything has developed with, like, you following that intuitive guidance and posting the article, and now you're, cascading into, a lot more depth of the knowledge? Is there anything that's like catching your eye, or you're super interested in learning more, uncovering, or like learning about?
yeah, I think there's so many things, to be fair.
What is, yeah, what is the better question here? What are you not interested in?
No, I think I want to go back to the water stuff. Like,
Yeah.
so like we talk about in the circadian quantum biology world, like light and EMF get so much of the attention for good reasons. The sun is, I've got an app called Sunlight is Life. Like
Yeah.
the sun is a powerful, powerful spiritual force. I tend to think water is equally as powerful. And that comes, there's always like the intuitive side and like the science side. And like I look at the science side because I'm curious, but like most of my results have come from the more intuitive side. So actually,
Mm.
after we're done with this, I'm going to go hike up to the spring up on off of Mount Hood. That is basically the water goes underground and stays underground for 80 years and comes out of this little hole in the ground that's like, well, you can't see, but it's like maybe 4 foot wide total, two little holes. And it's just this pristine water that I think has some spiritual power. And so I go up there and I just sit and I listen to the water, and invariably something will come to me. And sometimes it's not always something huge, just something, often it's something I already knew and just like was alienated from for whatever reason, but it's always there. And I think there's something to this kind of pristine water from the earth. It's like it's been vortexing underground, collecting minerals, and like just shielded from all everything in the external world that is, has a negative influence on us, and it comes out and it's pure. And if you think about the more science side of things, you look at Veda Asan's work, we can change how water's crystalline structure is based on our own thoughts and emotions. What about the other direction? And there's this this forester named Victor Schauberger. He's from around the time, he was a contemporary of the Waldorf Steiner, Rudolf Steiner.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Was he a mathematician too? Did he do math?
Schauberger?
It's not sure.
He might have actually, he was pretty, like, I have trouble reading his books because they're so dense in calculations and stuff. But so somebody wrote a translation of his book, and it was called Living Energies. And that's where I got my business and different account names from. And his belief was that water was a living force, and that water in nature has specific qualities. And he believed that the water could talk to you. And so I put that into practice, and I haven't learned all the science of it, and to some extent probably never will, and don't care to. But I think there's something there. And there's, if you ever go to like a crystal store, it's like, the metaphysical bookstore with like all the tarot and stuff and the crystals. And like, I think there's kind of an angle where quantum biology is eventually going to be able to explain all that stuff.
I think it's undeniable. From my naive perspective.
Right.
I'm thinking it's undeniable. From what I know from talking to people like you and the physicists, to then the complete other spectrum where, I came into this more like, okay, I've had these unexplainable incidences. Like, how could this be possible? And the only way you can explain it, if you don't just, chalk it up to God, is the world of quantum physics.
Yeah. And we're right on the verge of discovering that stuff. And I was talking to a friend that she does sound therapy, and she did a session for him because I've been pushing way too hard for too long, and my nervous system got kind of just like, and it just like unlocked everything in a 45-minute session. And we were talking about how, in like a couple of years, maybe a decade, who knows, we're going to look back on this time when we were like giving people anesthesia and like all these interventions that we do that help and hurt. We're going to look back at almost like the Stone Ages. Like, what were we doing? Like, we have all these subtle energetic forces that if we only learned how to harness them, we don't need any of this stuff. And so much of it, like you said, is internal too. And the technologies, the hallucinations, all the stuff, it's all within us. Everything in the universe is within us. It's kind of something that we've forgotten because we're so enamored with our technology. So I think for me, one of the things that happened with this EMF 49er story is I had never told any of my friends what I was up to with EMF, just because like, it's weird. Most people didn't even know what EMF was. Like, even my wellness friends, like, I would say it and be like, what's an EMF? And so I did learn to like let it go. And part of that was like, I don't want to bother people with my stuff. And like you said, like, there is like a loneliness of being in this kind of space, but I think it can be easier with you just like keep it over here, and I'll just be friends like a normal person with everybody that I love. And so most of them found out about it from the story going viral and seeing it and being like, wait. But the thing that I learned was like almost across the board, they were all really receptive to it. And so for me, the lesson was there's an element of trust here, and trusting that people, if I embody my practices and I come from a place of integrity and honesty, which I've been trying so hard to make sure that that's coming through in my social media presence and stuff, then people are going to give me the benefit of the doubt. And doesn't mean they have to believe me, but they won't think of me as some crazy conspiracy theorist. There's like, oh, that's Peter, he gets into his things. And like, maybe in 3 years, 5 years, 10 years, we'll be where he's at right now.
Yeah.
And so that's why, coming back to your questions, like I'm really interested in the water stuff and more on the kind of like subtle energetic side that we really can't explain with science, and how it interacts with like crystals. And there's this, back to the like the science spirituality duality, there's Marcel Vogel was a do you know Vogel?
Yeah,
Yeah,
Vogel.
so he developed hard drives for IBM for many decades and got
Right.
really masterful at creating crystals. And so he translated that into making these perfect quartz crystals called the Vogel crystal. You can, there's a couple places that sell them, and just like the idea that these things don't have power that affect us, to me now seems more absurd than the idea that crystals are just like some woo woo thing. Like, no, like we know so much about crystals and the transceiver idea. So kind of for me is like going leaning deeper into that, and like the sound stuff, which we also can't like, we can kind of explain some of it. What's his name? John Stewart Reed. Like
Mm-hmm.
he gets really into the physics of it, and like then issues with like collagen and piezoelectricity. Like to me, the sun and light and EMF is kind of the low hanging fruit, and then getting deeper into this other stuff and trusting that people will take me seriously and not just write me off, because I've already been written off honestly as a kook and a conspiracy, so I have nothing to lose. I think there's a lot happening there, and you go into these worlds like the sound people, like they got the LED lights, they don't know, but they're doing the sound stuff, and you got like the quantum biomechanics people, and like everybody's kind of silent. I want to just kind of bring it all together. So I'm on my Substack. I'm doing investigative journalism as my main, like, come to my Substack for this, because I got another story that I'm about to break that I think to me is more important than the 49ers EMF story, and it bigger, probably won't get the same notice, but it's an important story. But I really want to write more about this kind of woo stuff that I think isn't woo woo at all and is kind of the future. And people can come along, like I'll take the hits, you just read about it and incorporate it in your life and point to me and say like, crazy guy's writing about it, but whatever.
I'm with you in the bandwagon. Sign me up, because
Okay.
I'm totally, I think it's going to be like your friend said, we're going to look at this time and say like, wow, we were such in the stone age there in our thinking and our practices. I think there is a direct correlation between, like you said, these natural energies that we're tapping into, like water, magnetism, like all of the different elements that nature provides us. When you mentioned water, one last thing, I was seeing like, okay, we're mostly water, our body. And then you have like what takes up most of the earth, like water.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Now you're like, wow. Okay. Now we're getting into like a very interesting loop there. If you just like take a step back, you're like, wait, the human body is mostly water and so is the earth. Like nature doesn't make mistakes. Why? You know
Yeah.
what I mean? So like that must be maybe the information layer, like you're saying, or,
Right.
like a part of the information layer at least has to be,
Yeah.
it's undeniable.
Let me just say one thing about that. We can leave that with
Yeah.
there's these Italian condensed matter physicists, Del Duce, I can't pronounce, Preparata and Del Duce, their names, and they have a whole theory of the coherent water as a coherent information system. It's fascinating work. It connects. I think you could say that Pollock kind of extended their work a little bit and
Mm.
turned it into a more experimental thing that we could do in a lab. And then Mei Wan Ho kind of connected the two. So that's kind of where I'm digging into next. I think it's really beautiful. I love that you just said you think of water as the information layer, because I think that's exactly right.
Yeah. And there's so many rabbit holes. I feel like this definitely with part one. Well, in a few months we could do part two, because I would love to. We didn't even touch really on the subtle energies and like that whole spectrum and like all the different elements that are within that broad topic. But I think there's a lot here. And I think, you're someone like you is a beacon of light and hope in this world to just help bring this knowledge from the woo. And I hate that it's so woo woo. Like even a crystal, it's like, dude, I once thought a crystal was just a rock too. But if you just detach your ego and you go look, it has piezoelectric capabilities. Like it can't just be a rock.
Yeah.
That's where I get nuts. I'm like, wait a minute. Now you get into this. You're like, hold on, there's something
Yeah.
here.
Hold on. Yep.
But I think it's really important that we have storytellers like yourself that are willing to go into the ancient wisdom and all the, research and really get into the investigative journalism, like you said, to weed out like what is bullshit, because there is a bunch of bullshit that are surrounding these topics. Not everything people say about frequencies or like spiritualism or water is accurate. You know what I mean? It's like that's not what we're saying. I think we're the highlight here is dig deeper. Like go deeper and don't be afraid to. And also you can learn a lot if you just, leave your ego right there and your opinions and your preconceived thoughts and all of your preconditioning to the side and just dive into some of Peter's work and the work that we've mentioned. I think will unlock, is the potential to unlock your best self, just the little beginnings, the little nuggets that you need to get to that point. And like you said, we're not always going to be perfect, you might not be taking care of your vessel, but hey, you're putting out really good work for the world to read and research. So dualism, you take it as it comes. We can't all be 100% the best, but any lasting thoughts, Peter? Where can people find you?
I would say number one right now is my Substacks, peteranthonycowan.substack.com, and that's where everything's going to flow through. I mean, if you want to find me on Twitter and Instagram, I kind of do a lot of shit posting on Twitter and Instagram. I'm trying to post more, but Substack is where I'm kind of like, that's the place to go to just see what I'm working on. And I have a follow up to the 49ers thing that I'm going to release in the next month or so. And then another investigative journalism piece that hopefully in a couple of weeks, I might actually publish with a real newspaper first and then on my Substack. So, and then maybe later this year, I'll do like some investigative journalism about something like a crystal or something. I'm inspired now to like bridge that gap. So
I think there's a lot. There. And I definitely have a couple research articles to share with you, maybe that you've stumbled into, but I think that could spark maybe some interesting threads there. But I think that's the way, the connectivity, looking at how are things connecting and what could we use, what frameworks can we use to explain those away or realize that we can't explain and it's just unexplainable.
Yeah. Can I share one more thing?
Please.
PeterCowan.com is my piano music website. And the only place I've ever written about spirituality at all is on that website. And one of the most lovely things that's happened from this 49ers thing is I get emails from people that actually go through all my links and they're like, I just want to let you know that we had a dinner party the other night and we listened to your piano music. We just pressed play on the playlist and it was so lovely. So people like it. And so maybe you'll like it too.
I'm going to tune in. And then that's a great end because again, I was talking to my physicist, a friend, Dr. Igor, and he was telling me about Mozart music and how Mozart's music is used in psych wards because it is the only music that does not, something along the lines of it doesn't have any rhythm. So he has over 500 compositions and not any single one is the same. So often music is like very rhythmic and that's why you can't play it in like psych wards. But I don't remember what study or what he was specifically talking about, but it was Mozart music is used and there is some research around it being used in psychiatric settings because it does de-entrain the brain in that like loop. So another fascinating rabbit hole
can't resist
that we could go down. But this is just the beginning. So I appreciate you, Peter. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Shelley. Really, really had a great time talking to you.
Amazing. We'll talk soon. Peace.